G'day, I'm Owen Johnston. Welcome to Hop Harvest at Bushy Park Estates in Tasmania, Australia.
G'day. Today we're going to take a tour of the farm and meet some of the team behind our hops.
Our first stop is Cemetery Hill, which offers a spectacular panorama of the farm. This is where we like to bring our guests to give them a quick history lesson while they soak in the scenery. William Shoebridge successfully brought hops from England to Australia back in 1822. It was his son, Ebenezer, who established Bushy Park Estates in 1867. It stands about 55 kilometres from Hobart, bordered by the Styx and Derwent rivers. The water available, the alluvial soils, the stable microclimate, created by the proximity to the coast and protection from the mountain ranges, means it's pretty much the perfect place for growing hops. Bushy Park also happens to be on the same latitude as Nelson, the biggest growing hop region in New Zealand. You'll notice I said Bushy Park Estates, plural. We chose to retain this name as a nod to the diverse original farms that are now under our consolidated ownership. We also acknowledge the farms and their original owners in the names of some of our gardens. Ebenezer Shoebridge effectively made it possible for them to enter the hop industry by building what is still our most historically significant structure today. The Thetex Kiln was named for the biblical scriptures that adorn its walls. It was operational from 1867 until, unbelievably, the early 1990s.
Bushy Park Estates has become a modern, intensive agribusiness spread over 260 hectares capable of producing more than 600 metric tonnes of hops. We've been lucky enough to invest in process and capacity improvements while the market conditions have been good, which has set us all up for a future of delicious beer. We have a team of around 30 permanent staff here at Bushy Park Estates, but that grows to around 150 over harvest when we operate 24 hours a day, 6 days a week. The day shift normally starts at 6 a.m, with the night shift taking over at 6 p.m.
The first step of the harvesting process is that the bottom cutter passes through, cutting the bines close to the root. It typically passes through 2 minutes before the top cutter arrives, which enables the vines to stay fresh and be transported back to the harvesting complex. The top cutter waits for the tractor to drive in ahead of it. The tractor is put into neutral and pushed along by the top cutter, cutting as close to the wire as it possibly can, enabling the vines to fall into the trailer. The tractor is then put into gear and transported back to the complex for harvesting. Believe it or not, when we're finished, we'll have harvested 1.5 million strings.
The Bushy Park Estates picking complex was built in 1992. It houses 2 downhour pickers, 12 kiln floors, a conditioning floor and a bale press.
Inside, it's basically a mirror image with 1 downhour picker and 6 kiln floors on each side of the shed. The tractors all come through this door, peel off left or right to a vacant loading bay under the tracks.
The teams drive in and they park their tractors under the hooks. They then attach their bines to the hooks, which carries them up to the picking machine.
So, how old are the picking machines?
These picking machines here are 30 years old. Despite them being 30 years old, they're still the best tool for the job. There's been no real development in picking techniques in the last 30 years, so if you buy a new machine today, they're nearly identical.
Have you made customisations to these machines over time?
We've made a couple of little tweaks here and there. The most recent addition we've made are water sprays in the picking heads here. They help minimise the cone shatter to make sure we get as many whole cones as possible all the way through to the kiln.
So the principles haven't changed much over time?
No, this particular principle is very reliable.
And what parts do you need to replace most often?
These parts here, the picking fingers, they get snagged in the hops and we have to make regular checks to make sure they're still attached and they're not broken.
So if a picking finger breaks and it falls down into the hop stream, is that a problem?
In the picking machine we have several sets of magnets, which we check regularly through every shift.
You must get a good pick off these machines. What variables can you control?
So we can adjust the speed of the picking fingers as well as the width of the picking head to make sure that we get every single hop cone off the vine we possibly can.
And off to the cleaners?
Yeah, so once the hops have finished in the picking head here and fallen onto the grizzly mesh, they're off to the cleaning bank to separate the hop cone from the leaves and the stem.
So the hop and waste stream that's delivered to the cleaners has hop cones and leaf and stick and stem. Can you tell me about how the cleaners work?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's three processes in the cleaning of the hops. The first process is the grizzly mesh underneath the picking head. That carries larger sticks and leaf off to the mulcher. The second phase of the cleaning process are the cleaners here, where the hops and the leaf fall in front of a big fan. The fan pushes the remaining leaf against a mesh where that gets carried off to the mulcher as well.
And the remaining hop cones and whatever else is left carries forward in the process?
Yeah, yep. So they head off to the last cleaning point in the process, which is the dribble belts.
And how do these work, Tom?
So once the hops and the remaining leaf have left the cleaners, they'll come onto the belts here. The remaining leaf will stick to the belts where they'll work their way all the way through to the end. The hops will roll down the belts and head on up to the kiln.
There seems to be a lot of levers here. What do these do?
So these levers here change the angles off the belt because we want to make sure there's always a clean stream of hops rolling off the back of the belt, making their way to the kiln.
So how do you measure success?
Regularly on every shift, we check for extraneous matter in our clean hop stream.
And have you got a target?
So we like to keep that under 1%. If a check comes back and it's over 1%, we know to come back to either adjust the speed of the picking heads, the speed of the fan in the cleaners, or the angles on the dribble belts.
What happens to the extraneous matter?
So once the clean hops make their way to the kiln, the extraneous matter goes outside where we compost it and spread it across the farm. So now we're in the kiln. The clean hop stream comes along the boom here where they're laid across the floor at 600 mils deep.
And Phil, when the kiln floor is full, what temperature do you set the burners at?
We set that at 60 degrees and then we dry them between 8 and 12 hours and we're trying to get it down to 8 to 12% moisture.
How do you measure that moisture when you're getting close to the target? How do you actually find out?
Well, we wait till about 8 hours and then we get in there with the probe and we start go around on a diamond shape and we get 9 readings and we average it out and see what it is. And if it's not in spec, we just keep it going.
Come back and do it again until you're in the moisture spec.
So once you've got your final moisture reading, Phil, you write in the kiln log, which is an integral part of our quality system, which allows for product traceability.
That's right.
So the kiln floor logs through the quality system are linked to the finished pellet lot code available to the brewers. It's pretty hot and humid up here. It reminds me of a brewhouse platform, usually accompanied by some heavy metal on the stezza. Is there a soundtrack here in the kiln?
Yeah, the picking machine.
So when all 12 kiln floors are full up here, it's 40 degrees and just about 80% humidity.
What does a kiln floor weigh when it's wet?
Each floor weighs about 9 tonnes when it's green, and once it's dried down, it weighs anywhere between 1 and 2.
What do you do once you've hit your moisture spec? What happens next?
We turn the burners off and then we cool it down for 20 minutes and then we drop it down to the conditioning floor.
Watching a kiln floor drop into the conditioning room is a pretty special sight. Each kiln floor is loaded with a drag cloth which is attached to the rollers above us. Once the kiln floor is in spec, the roller turns where it's dropped down into the conditioning room floor where the hops sit for 12 hours while the moisture and heat distribute evenly through the pile.
So once the hops have been conditioned, they're elevated to the top of the hydraulic bale press and pressed into bales. Well, let's go and meet someone who knows more about pressing a bale than anyone else on site. He's been operating the bale press since 1992. So Brian, you must have pressed a few bales since 1992.
Thousands and thousands.
So finished hops on the conditioning floor are elevated up to the top of the hydraulic press here and into the chute. What happens next?
That goes automatic down the chute and they press 3-4 times.
What's your target weight?
110 kilos.
And how many bales an hour do you look for?
17 bales to 3 presses, 12 bales, 4 presses.
So once the bale is pressed, the hydraulic ram lifts up and the bale comes out right here.
That's right.
It's at this point that each bale gets a unique number. Pallets of bales are auger sampled to confirm that they are in spec. Next, the bales are transported up to the pellet plant, where they're broken down through the bale breaker and milled into a powder before being pressed through the die and into the pellets. Annalee, what does it take to press a perfect pellet?
Pressing the perfect pellet starts with having a great blend of hops so that the oils, alphas and moistures balance out. And then during the process we have to monitor the temperature and the density. So we do that once an hour, make sure that the temperature through the die doesn't exceed 55 degrees Celsius.
Do you have a density spec?
Our density specs are between 500 and 550, so we do that once an hour also. If it's below or higher than that, something's wrong.
James, the pellets have been pressed. What happens next?
So they go onto our packaging line, which we package off into various sizes for our customers. Then they go into an oxygen barrier foil, then get sealed with CO2, then packed off into required size.
What's the shelf life on a sealed, backpacked foil?
Given they've been treated right and in the right storage of under 5 degrees Celsius, they should last 3 years.
We store our pellets in temperature-controlled warehouses around Australia and cold ship to our distribution partners around the world. Well, that's the end of our tour. Thanks very much for taking the time to learn a bit about Bushy Park Estates and our processes.
We hope you enjoyed this year's hop harvest, and we're looking forward to seeing you all on farm again soon.
G'day. Thanks for joining us on a tour of what you're going to have to admit is a beautiful part of the country. We're joined on the couch with this young fella Brad from the tropics. As you can see, he's running a bit cold. We've got the grow lights on, just trying to simulate the subtropic climate so Brad keeps warm.
We're nearly there.
Brad is the co-founder with Jamie and Roscoe at Stone and Wood and the Fermentum family of businesses. Also chief cook up there, I think you'd have to admit.
Yeah, chief cook, sure.
But you've had quite a journey to get to this point. Studied winemaking at Roseworthy, finishing something like 93?
93,
93,
yeah,
and
yep.
Straight over to CUB in 94.
Yep.
So, quite some apprenticeship there, including a long stint over in Fiji.
Trip over to Fiji. Bit of distillery work as well.
A bit different.
A little bit.
What was it, do you think, that appealed to CUB about your skill set and, coming out of the Roseworthy course?
Wow, I probably pressured and harassed them for long enough. They almost felt like they had to give me this job. So, yeah, it was a great time, in the big house. Got to learn lots and lots of different things. Meet a heap of people around the world.
Yep, yeah. Who was leading the Kent Brewery at that point?
That was Kent Robinson.
Oh, really?
And Michael Brooks.
Yep.
The two, top shows over there back in the day. Still very good friends.
Fantastic. And then, we'll get into it a bit more down the track, but of course the Matilda Bay phase where I'd say, much more experimental, some really sort of cutting edge beers coming out of there at that time.
Yeah, I mean, I had the luxury of coming back from Fiji to Sanctuary Cove. Met Jamie back in the late 99, thereabouts. Set foot on the Masthead Brewery, and then joined the Masthead Brewery with the Matilda Bay Brewery, and set foot to do some pretty interesting things in craft beer back in those early days of the early 2000s. In Australia, where people didn't really understand what craft or boutique beer was.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I remember beers like Barking Duck early in my professional career were still pretty edgy, for a simple fella like me.
Yeah, putting barrels in breweries under Matilda Bay was. It was a big step. There was a lot of frowns in the old guard back in those days.
Actually, I remember touring the garage site there in Victoria with you. I can't remember, 2005 or 6 or something like that.
Yeah.
And I was there to see all the shiny stainless steel, and all we did was sample barrel stuff. And I think I walked away with pretty much a wrecked pallet, I think.
Yeah, it's almost come full circle, hasn't it?
Yeah, well, absolutely confused and challenged. Thanks. So we've had the pleasure of welcoming Brad on the farm many, many times, through the Galaxy and Stone and Wood journey. And I thought it might be of better value for us not to blow by blow go through a farm tour, which we've just seen. So I wanted to range a bit more broadly in a conversation with Brad and talk about the link between agriculture and beverage.
Production, yep.
Yeah, and how that sort of can add value to the consumer or to the broader community. So I guess I wanted to lead off with somewhat of a niche question, because of your winemaking training and connection with agriculture and winemaking is pretty clear, obviously. Do you think the wine industry has an advantage in telling the agricultural story because of their more intimate relationship?
I think at the moment, certainly, wine around the world has a much more in-depth look at where the grapes come from, and I think the drinker actually understands that those grapes play such an important role in wine. But that's very much changing in the beer industry as well. I mean, there's a lot of people that actually know what malt is, malted grains, hops, water, yeast. People are getting it. I think for beer, I mean, there's a real story in hops. Like grapes, there are a vintage, material. I mean, it's just fascinating to watch the process of how hops grow out in the farms, and then the luxury of being able to actually, walk up to a vine, actually pull some hops off, smell those hops, and go, wow, and then make some beer with those hops. And as a brewer, I think that's vital. But I think the drinker is really starting to understand how important that link to the ground, to the glass, really is. I think there's a lot of people out there these days that really get it and understand how important that is. And people are actually asking, what sort of hop is that? Where'd that hop come from? Not quite to the the wine side, or what side of the hill was that grapevine?
Sure. But at least now, so many brands on the shelf, and they're naming up a hop on the front of the label. You don't even have to go searching for it, So the consumer is being presented with this information. You're quite right. What side of the hill is not quite the level that we're at yet. But do you think it's something that we'll never quite tell as well as them, because we have this inherent expectation of consistency and being, like 2 vintages of Galaxy come out? Is the brewer's challenge then to blend and account for seasonal difference to make a consistent product? Does that diminish our ability?
I think understanding what happened through the growing period of that hops is so vitally important. Obviously, the acids, the oils, the flavour of that hop is dictated by what happens in the ground and the climate. Yeah, I think that's still very, very important.
We've come a long way though since when did you come back from Fiji? 98?
99.
99, yeah. You've seen things change?
Yeah, well, I think just for Stone and Wood, Jamie, Roscoe and I up in Byron, I think there was like 30 or 40 breweries back when we started. What is there now? 700 or 800, I lose track.
Yeah.
It's just incredible what's happened in this industry, but it's around the world. I mean, craft is a thing. Craft beer is a thing, and people are very interested to search out, the latest, greatest.
And so you just to pause on that point, you see that consumer trend, that thing that gives craft and diversity in the beer marketplace momentum. You see that trend staying with us for the long run?
Oh, absolutely.
Craft is not a flash in the pan?
Oh, definitely not. And then, back to the wine sort of things as well. I mean, the way the drinker actually understands those grapes, the beer drinker is doing exactly the same thing, and they're interested and they're curious to understand where their beer has come from, who's made it, what are the ingredients, and what are the processes that those ingredients have actually come through.
Yeah, and just that clip that we've just watched just before, it would be much easier challenge for us just to shoot some nice footage of the scenery and do some voiceovers and be done with it. But really, I really feel consciously that it's right to show those people, the hands and the faces of the guys on the farm, share their experience about what we do, even though we're one step removed from the end user.
Yeah, but I also think, the end user, the drinker, the important drinker, I don't think it's too far from those drinkers really wanting to have tours of hop farms and, get more depth of an understanding of what's happening out there, just like people do in the wine industry. I can see that happening. Obviously with hops, there's a very short window to actually harvest and get people out there, so it's certainly going to have some challenges.
Yeah, so just picking up on that theme, you think there's a role for humble hop growers to open the gate more broadly to assist with this culture piece, this education of drinkers?
Yeah, I think the brewing industry would benefit out of that. People are thirsty for that information. Open the door appropriately, and people that are thirsty for that info,
we'll go and find it.
We'll keep looking. I remember driving past hop fields, 25 years ago, 35 years ago, not really even understanding what they are.
Yeah, well, certainly when I started brewing, the idea of hops were literally, and I profess my own ignorance, were a trusted commodity, a trusted ingredient, an input coming in, and manage it that way.
That's a really good point. I mean, back in the day, hops probably were just a commodity. They're not anymore. People are paying good money for good hops, and that hop gives such an incredible flavour into your individual beers and your brands across your business.
Yeah, I do see it in our Australian brewing landscape that the brewers are seeking more from us. They're pulling more information from their hop merchants and from their growers every year. And certainly, like I say, when I started, I just had to trust what was turning up because I didn't have the headspace or the time to go too deeply back up the supply chain. Really, really encouraging and pleasing that people are asking those questions now. I guess as it relates to Galaxy and Stone and Wood, that's a
beautiful story.
A beautiful story that's been well told, well captured. I think. When did you first see Galaxy?
I reckon I first sort of saw Galaxy. What was it? 2006, 7, somewhere around then. Certainly before, we actually started off the Stone and Wood, gang. But I sort of understood what Galaxy was. Held that little piece up my sleeve and set foot with what back in the day was draft ale. Very quickly became Pacific ale, and as we know, Pacific ale is 100% Galaxy, and the aromatic of that, tropical fruit, passion fruit, mango, it's just so intense in the farm. You can see and you can almost taste it, and then that hop then gets used into our beer, and it's what you taste in the farm is what you taste in the beer. Having the opportunity to have lots of brewers on the farm and show them different commercial varieties and some of the experimentals and stuff there seems to be a couple of different types of thinkers out there. Was Galaxy a light bulb thing for you, or was it like a tuck that away and let it gestate, let it come together as a concept for a bit? It all had to come together. Jamie Ross and I had a classic tasting of 60, 70 beers in a house that we had in Melbourne. And, it was tasting different things, what you wanted in a beer, what you didn't want in a beer. And then, just step back from that. And, Galaxy played a pretty big role, in what we went forward with draft ale, Pacific ale.
Yeah.
The really cool thing, with Galaxy hop is it's almost identical. The closest hop you can see in a farm to what you've got in that beer. Not many hops actually do that. I've walked around a lot of hop farms around the world, and you can smell a hop, smell it in the beer, but nothing quite like Galaxy. It is pretty unique.
It is unique a bit like that. And I think some of the power of Galaxy as a successful hop variety is that it is sort of simple in that way. And this is not to diminish anyone or anything. It's actually
keep
quite
things simple.
Yeah, keep it simple. It actually, you get what you expect. You get it in the beer.
Yeah, absolutely. When you add it, how you add it. We obviously use it on the hot side, bit of bitterness, but on the cold side, into fermenters, quite phenomenal hop.
There you go.
The cool thing, with Pacific Ale, Galaxy, HBA and Galaxy, we've all kind of grown up together with that hop. What are we now? 12 or 13 years old.
Yeah. Crikey.
Feel it?
Very much so. Great. So, maybe a little bit of maybe skating on thin ice, but we said that we work in an industry that has some negative social outcomes like this. Do you think that the ability to tell the agricultural story and Australian, the resonance that Australian agriculture has with Australians, do you think this is a way in which we can sort of ameliorate and clarify the impact that our sector of the industry actually has?
Yeah, I definitely think, that link back to agriculture makes it, it's real. But I think with everything, abuse just needs to be managed.
Yeah, and of course we need to account, and quite correctly so, through excise, etc.
Yep.
But it's about, for me, it's about that accuracy in people's perception of what beer represents, and it isn't that factory made sort of thing.
No, we've probably moved a long way from the big house sort of beers into those smaller, unique craft beers. Which you've got breweries around the world only make a beer in that brewery. If you want to taste it, you've got to go there. Yeah, I think that adds to the mystique of what some of these beers are. But yeah, I think like everything, you've just got to be careful.
There's absolutely, there's you alone sit across a real diversity of beer offerings out there.
We do.
Yeah, like so.
There's quite a bit happening.
Still, even just in the last couple of weeks, it's fantastic. Where was I going with that? So, just more about like what is floating your boat? What do you want to pursue in terms of what you offer with whether it's diversity or culture and education or anything? What's floating your boat?
No, I think the educational side of making sure you've got the tools with you to be able to educate the drinker, as we've already spoken to. That's vital going forward. We want people to understand more about what we're doing as growers, as brewers. I think that's absolutely vital. For me personally, I suppose, we've got Forest for the Trees, which is a little less hop dominated in terms of beers and brands. But yeah, the new world of, old world of, putting beer in barrels and mixed ferments, wild ferments, plays a part. And hops are always going to play a part, in those sorts of beers as well. I was lucky enough last night to try a couple of beers from a young Van Diemen man up the road from where we're sitting. Unbelievable, but those wild ferments, mixed ferments, but still quite amazing beers up there, and using some pretty cool hops.
Yeah, absolutely, and I've had a long philosophy of hops do not have to be the hero in every beer. Yeah. There's ways to produce diversity through skillful use. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, some, you look at the classic German lager, it's all about the grain, really. Obviously, the backbone of those beers is the grain, but it needs the hop there to play a part in that symphony, and that's really, really important. So I think for us with Galaxy and Pacific, it's all about Galaxy in our Pacific Ale. So aromatically pungent. The
HPA breeding programs, that innovation hub in this business, and that's where Galaxy's come from. If we don't support a breeding program in house, we don't get hops like Galaxy. 20 years later.
Cool. Is this where you tell us what the next Galaxy is?
So, Brad, I'd like you to try this new hop. No, actually, I was going to go the other way, and I was going to say, like, our whole business has pivoted onto modern varieties. I'll go out on a limb here and say that Galaxy is actually our oldest variety still in the ground. So the old bittering days are done.
Oh, no Pride.
No, Pride died in 2015. Super Pride last year.
Yeah, when you look at hops like Galaxy and the way you guys have put your breeding program together, the alphas in some of these hops are massive anyway. So
yeah. There's definitely plenty of alpha kicking around.
Amazing.
I guess I wanted to sort of segue out into what's your opinion on that malt piece? The barley and malt industry has come under a little bit of scrutiny for not diversifying their flavour offerings and innovating with new varieties in the same way. I sort of feel like they've copped a little bit of unfair flack about breeding for no difference. No flavour difference and just better agronomics.
Consistency, maybe.
Yep.
Yeah, I think the hop industry is probably a little ahead of the grain growers.
Do you think there's really that much pressure on them, given that the maltster is in between?
Probably not. When you think about barley being grown, a lot of that barley that gets grown goes off to other industries, important industries. a portion of that gets malted into malted barley, which then goes to other industries, and then there's a portion left.
A tiny portion goes to brewers.
And then there's a portion that's left for brewers. And then, in terms of diversity of grain, and it's not just the grain, it's the processing of that grain. Various maltsters do different things. Yeah, I think in Australia we're on the cusp. It's just emerging that the whole individuality of some of these grains and malting processes. Yeah, I think stay tuned.
Yeah, okay, interesting. I sort of, there's a little piece in my view of it that says the maltster, in between the grower and the brewer, the maltster already produces a diversity. You've got international maltsters all making different flavours, and there is a plethora of malts out there. Do we need the same scrutiny on barley varieties?
Yeah, I think. The interesting thing with the barley varieties is one piece of the puzzle. But then it's off to the maltster, and the maltster could do a myriad of things with that grain, in their facilities. Whether you're toasting here, roasting that. If we leave barley and we leave grapes alone, we leave hops alone for a second. Yeast.
Yeah, well, that could throw that in the mix. What other industry or direct input do you think tells a great agricultural story and links their story of growing with what the end drinker understands about that process?
Yeah, the first one that comes into my mind, something close to me, coffee. Coffee. And the process of growing coffee. I've been lucky enough to live where we live, and I've had a crack at growing coffee. It was shite. Mowed over that very, very quickly. But I've had the luxury as well as, actually roasting my own coffee back in the day. I think coffee is a pretty incredible plant and grown in places.
Where'd that little roaster at the garage end up?
I think it might still be floating around Melbourne. I might know exactly where it is.
Excellent. Yeah, I was
definitely coffee.
Thinking of coffee as well. Yeah,
coffee, and tea. Up where we are, there's some pretty cool tea growing facilities.
It's a bit of an emerging industry up there, isn't it?
Yeah, tea. Well, and then another little piece of the puzzle. For us, we use a lot of tea in making kombucha. So it's quite diverse.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess when I was thinking about having you join me for this conversation, I was trying to feed in that breadth of beverage under the fermentum, family. And are there any other interesting inputs you've got on the go?
We've completely skipped over cider. The growing of apples. It wasn't too long ago when there was a fair drought up north. Not a lot of apples in drought times. Yeah, so that process of growing apples and the flavour that then ends up in those apples,
it's quite different. I am
seasonal, and you have to manage that.
I'm totally ignorant to the impact of different seasonality on apples as it relates to cider. It's I never even realised how ignorant I was until I spoke to you.
It definitely plays a part. But I think of all of those, drinks that we've just spoken to, those base raw materials are vital. Whether it be coffee, grape, malt, hops.
What do you think? What do you think a small brewer can do to harness agriculture to try and lift her output? Lift the quality, lift the interest, lift the diversity, separate the flavour from his neighbour. Is there anything?
Pick up the phone and talk to the growers. And those raw materials are so important in their beers, in their wines, in everything. Pick up the phone and actually understand more about it. Read a book, read an article, get a bit of understanding, and talk to people like you. And go out to the farms where actually, for me, I love to see it. I've got to be able to see it to really understand it. And I remember, when was that? Back in the early 2000s, out at Bushy Park years ago, seeing that process for the first time.
I've often repeated the story of my first time in that Bushy Park processing facility, and it really literally made my head spin. It's just such a overwhelming audio, sensory, visual experience.
Well, for me, it was definitely the sensory, just walking into that kiln room. Wow.
Yeah. I make a point, ever since I started working for HPA, I make a point of being there for that very first delivery of hops onto the kiln floor.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Yeah, typically it's Cascade here in Tasmania where we're sitting, and even still, you know, Cascade's quite a moderate variety, right? It's not the 10 out of 10 impact we talk about with our modern proprietary flavour varieties, but still, yeah, just heaves off the kiln floor. It's amazing.
You feel it.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah, you know, that first crop, or the first harvest piece in, I reckon seeing the last one would be pretty cool as well, working out there.
Everyone's a bit more emotional by the last one.
Yeah, I think so. Ready for a beer.
Ready for a beer. Yeah, excellent. All right, well, Brad, we only have a limited time because we ask a lot of our audience to join us for the preceding film clip and then to listen to us ramble on. The rambler-meter tells me that we should go and have a beer or a coffee or something.
Oh, beauty.
We'll go fishing.
All right. Oh, we could do all of that.
So thank you very much. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for taking the time out to actually come and be with us.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Come down to Hobart. Haven't been here for a long time, so thanks to you, OJ, Tim, the whole HBA team. Yeah, absolute pleasure being here. Thank you.
Thanks very much. A huge thank you to everyone who was part of this session. If you missed some of the action because you couldn't understand our Aussie accents, a recording will be uploaded to hops.com.au/virtual-harvest. For further information, please email info@hops.com.au, and we hope to welcome you all on farm again soon.